Hello. So let's go to our final session today on ex situ. Wait a minute. Ex situ and in situ PGR management ensure quality and efficiency. And we will start with Theo van Hintum. We'll talk about the certification system for ex situ gene banks.
I'll talk about the certification system for ex situ gene banks. And you might know this picture or an earlier one. That's the accessions in the world. So that looks great. Everything is covered. It's not, and it's not accessible, and it's not reliable. I'll get to that. And the presentation is about how we can improve that situation. In the preparation, we were not sure whether this would be a workshop where it is possible to give feedback and you interrupt me. And we have a nice, that's not possible. So it will be unidirectional, but I would appreciate you listening anyway, right? You should do that in your own time. Svalbard is not a gene bank. It's just a place for storing safety backups. And it's a picture from FAO, so I didn't make it. So FAO gives in Europe 425 gene banks with over 2 million accessions. Imagine that. Imagine also how much that costs, right? But what does it mean? Are these gene banks, and can we rely on them for conserving our plant genetic resources for our children and grandchildren, since that's the objective, right? And if a user wants to use those 2 million accessions, can he or she have access to it? And the answer basically is that the fact that there are so many accessions and so many gene banks means that very many people are working on this and very much money is spent. I'm spending too much time now, I realize. Are these gene banks, can we rely on them, on conserving our PGR? The simple answer is no. Hardly, very few gene banks are truly reliable. Also, if we think in terms of continuity, strange new governments, wars, and all that stuff, right? And do people have access to this material? Rarely. This is a negative picture, but I'm afraid it is reality. Gene bank community doesn't want to know. And I'm soiling my nest now, right? I realize that. But this is reality, we have to face it. And I think that we only need to make small steps to improve it. And that's the nice thing, that's the positive element. Let's talk about that. So it means that there is attention for genetic diversity, conservation, plant genetic resource diversity. There are funds and there are very many PGR collections. So that's a good starting point. Why is the current system ineffective? Well, gene banks lack quality. The conservation mechanisms are often unreliable. Regeneration is not done right. The seeds are not in the proper conditions. The freezers don't have spare parts. So if they break, everything you can imagine that can go wrong is wrong somewhere. I visited many gene banks and I've seen it. I can give examples of everything. It's a miracle that I can sleep at night. And access is limited. Talk to users, ask them where they get the material, and you'll hear that it is a very limited number of gene banks that truly give access. But I have to hurry on. As a result, collaboration between gene banks is hindered. So if a gene bank is conserving material and another gene bank is conserving the same material, that gene bank can't say I stopped conserving it because the other is doing it, because this gene bank can't rely on that other gene bank. And there's a problem. We're wasting money by redundancies that we cannot remove because of that low quality. If the quality is higher, we can start doing this. So let's first take a look at what is a gene bank. And I think in presentation of you looked it up in an old publication. I don't care. My definition is a gene bank conserves plant genetic resources for future generations of users and makes it available to the current. How do we define the terms there used? Conservation, arbitrary, but let's say according to the FAO GMANK standards. We've been talking about it, we've agreed on those standards. Those are pretty good standards allowing us to properly conserve material. Availability, again, and even more complicated, let's say under the standard material transfer agreement as agreed under the International Treaty for Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture. All these things you can disagree with me. And on all these things, I would like to have your feedback, but it's not working right now. If we talk about a global PGR system, which is our aim, right, then we're talking about a network of genebanks that can rely on each other and use their combined resources in an optimal way. If you can regenerate cucurbits, well, I might send my material to you so that you regenerate that material. You have the expertise in the environment. Dream on. That's way off, right? But in the end, we hope to get there. So if we talk about a certification system, we might start in Europe, and the research infrastructure would be a perfect platform to do this, right? And in collaboration with the CGIAR, and we're in touch with CGIAR and the Global Crop Diversity Trust, they're very interested. They're more than interested. They've already made some steps in that direction and feel that doing it together with actors such as in Europe would really be creating a global standard. So we need to formulate the standard. What is a good GMANK, right? FAO gives us something. We have to introduce a quality management in GMANK because somehow we have to make sure that the SOPs, the standard operating procedures in that GMANK are formulated and are followed. Then we have to have a procedure. Something happened here. Could the technical guy help me, please? Since I lost I have to look there. Okay. We have to assure that the SOPs comply with those standards.
Sorry, but online we don't see your slides.
I thought so, yeah. Where is our technical support? Since I'm not the technical support, that's for sure. I'll continue talking anyway at home, but I hope, since my time is limited and we really had a good intention. And we need to have an auditing system, a certification system, some respected body that is able to make sure that that can acknowledge a GMANK that does what it is supposed to do. To me, my GMANK has quality certification, ISO. That was a demand by the government because they only wanted to give us money if we could prove that we did our job right. So for funding agencies in the future, this can be a requirement. That didn't help you.
Host
has gone home.
It has disabled screen sharing. That's the problem. And the host, I thought it was this computer, but it's not. It was this computer.
Somebody else is the host. I can continue talking anyway, but at home you can't see the screen now. Yeah, but can I forward? No, it's blocked.
No, we cannot see the screen.
No.
No.
So don't worry, go on. We try to follow you.
Okay, concentrate. Very important. If we say we need that certification in Europe, and we do, we have to help GMANKs get there. We have to create capacity building to introduce those the knowledge needed. You are the host now, it says. I am the host now. I do not know what to do. I am the host now. You arranged that. You should have done that half an hour ago. So we should create the capacity. Are you seeing it now at home?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, okay.
So we have to create the capacity, the human capacity to do the quality management and to do the activities in the GMANK at an appropriate level. And we have to, in many cases, also have a mechanism for providing facilities. If you don't have a proper dryer, you need to get a dryer, right? Who funds it is another matter, but if you want to be part of this system, you need to have the appropriate facilities. That's obvious. I don't dare to look at you now. There is policy support. In Europe, we defined a strategy for PGR in Europe, which was on request of the EU when it was delivered to the EU. Although the EU did not explicitly express support to it, it's there, we can refer to it. It came from the PGR community, and it formulates that a capacity should be created and facilities should be improved. Mechanisms to achieve the standards need to be created for the certification, meaning, and well, all that. I mean, basically, I'm repeating ourselves. In the European strategy was saying that we should do what I'm telling now that should be done. Standards are largely formulated with the FAO GenBank standards. I referred to them as well before, but there is a problem on what's the word? Genericity, whether it should be generic or specific, right? And that's difficult because somehow someone has to decide whether the SOPs comply to the standards. And if the standards are very general, that becomes a very difficult job. But if they're specific, you need very many. For each crop wild species, you would need a different standard. Anyway, that's an interesting discussion where I would like to have your feedback as well. I give an example on the slide, all right? We need to have quality management systems in GenBanks, and I already referred, and I'm very proud of that my GenBank was the first GenBank with an ISO certification quality management system. But we could say we regenerate brassica with only 5 plants, right? Nobody would object to that. So the link to the standards is missing in this one. But at least we say what we do and we do what we say. And somebody is checking, an independent auditing body. IPK, Nordgen, some GenBanks in Europe have a similar system already in place. And in France, they have their own system. Okay. The procedures have to comply to the standards. I explained that already. So we need experts, we need authorities that are able to do that comparison. And that's not a trivial job. And it will also not be immediately clear from the beginning. There needs to be an evolutionary process in there, an improvement process. But it's doable. So what if the SOPs don't meet, but have the right intention, or it's not a trivial one? Then that auditing certification system. So once a GenBank is at the appropriate level, we need a body to be able to check and say, you're okay, right? And come back after a couple of years or every year. In the ISO, there's an external audit every year and an internal audit every year. But every 5 years, there's a new certification, I think it's called. Who does it? And who pays for it? That's also a thing. There's a big fear in the GenBank community that in introducing a system like this would become very expensive. I doubt it. I think it saves money in the end. But this thing, you have to pay the company to come into the auditing. It would make sense that if we create a system that we would somehow do it ourselves, but we have to take care that it stays independent. And that's, I mean, I wouldn't dare to reject any of your GenBanks. So expertise, if it's our community, independence, if we take it outside, difficult, something we need to discuss and decide. In the end, capacity building is essential. Since very few GenBanks in Europe at the moment are at the appropriate level in terms of procedures, and very few, even less, have the capacity to do the quality management. That needs to be built. It's not there. So we should support each other in getting at that level. And this is my last slide. We need your input on very many things, but just to name a few, what type of certification do we need? How specific should it be? Type of auditing we need to know. Who should have have who has the authority to actually do? I think, for example, the Crop Trust would be an ideal organization to do that. And who should join? That's also an issue. I mean, we can talk about capacity building, and Vojtech will have a presentation about that in a moment. But who do we include? Do we include a farmer with 5 trees, right? Different trees, different varieties. Do we call that a genebank? Or what criteria do we set to be included in that program to reach that level? Because it will require investments. It might require serious investments to get those actors on the level that they need to be and to form part of that system that will conserve the genetic resources for your children and grandchildren and make them available for the people who create the varieties for the farmers that feed us now. It was a long last sentence, but it was one. Was I in time, Joan? I'm amazed. I think.
So now we'll have Maria Jose Díez from the Polytechnic University of Valencia, I think online.
Yes, online, yes.
So
I'm going to
talking about
share my screen.
Yes, just a moment.
So I am going to talk about some experience with peer review in European genebanks. Just to introduce the topic of my presentation, I want to position it in the frame of AGIS, an European genebank integrated system. AGIS is a platform connecting European genebanks under a common system for the long-term conservation of unique accessions of plant genetic resources. I want to leave. Yeah, okay. AGIS, some of the objectives of AGIS is to create an integrated system for plant genetic resources, conserve genetically unique accessions that are important for Europe, and make them readily available and easily accessible for breeding and research. As you can see, most of the European countries are part of AGIS. The system for monitoring the quality of AGIS is called AQUAS. AQUAS is a set of policies, processes, and procedures that have to be followed by all members of AGIS to ensure an appropriate quality of the activities in AGIS. AQUAS principle is quality management based on 4 actions, which are plan, do, check, and act. The first activity is plan, and this is record what you do and how you do it. That is, to write a detailed genebank manual in which you have to specify all things and all activities you do in the genebank. The second activity is do, which is follow the manual in your daily activities in the genebank, and also record any deviation from the standard. The third activity is check. So you have to check and monitor the above actions independently, that is outside of your genebank, from somebody outside of your genebank. And the last is act, which means improve what can or needs to be improved. So I will focus on the words that I have written in red color, the genebank manuals and the system of monitoring. The manual is the protocol and procedures that are used in the genebanks regarding these 4 main points. The first point is germplant acquisition. And in both sense, if you acquire the germplants from another genebank or from another institution, or if you collect directly the germplants. The second is ensure security, the physical security of the collection you are conserving. That is the safety. If there is safety duplication of that section stored in your genebank, the security equipment, the institutional and personal security, or if you have contingency plans. The third is germplants maintenance. And this is very different if you are conserving seeds, if you are conserving in vitro culture, plants in vitro culture, or cryopreservation, or crops vegetatively multiply in the field. So you, in the gene bank, you have information about the maintenance of viability, the maintaining genetic integrity, and ensure availability. So you describe in detail, for example, the pollination procedures that you use for different crops, including autogamous or allogamous crops, the regeneration procedures, summon of plants, etc., the seed processing, and everything. For regarding ensuring variability, you have also to describe the policy aspects, the health aspects, and the germplasm supply. And finally, providing information in the gene bank documentation system and the information exchange with national databases, with European databases like EURISCO, or world level databases like Genesis. So this is the manual of the gene bank. And the system proposed for monitoring the activities of the gene bank really on these two assumptions. The first one is most gene banks tried the right thing and have nothing to hide. This means that transparency. The gene banks have to be transparency regarding the activities they do. And all gene banks can learn from each other. Based on these two assumptions, the monitoring system proposed is the gene bank peer review. In this system, the peer review is carried out by groups, or in groups of 3 gene banks. One expert, or sometimes 2 experts from each gene bank participate in this peer review. The 3 experts review each other based on previous information and the review of the manual that I have described in the previous slide. And you have seen that is a very detailed manual. Then report is written by the reviewers and as much as possible made public. The report can be used in fundraising for improvements, and easy PGR can target capacity building in case it is needed. So to test this system proposed, there was a pilot experiment, gene bank peer review, with 3 gene banks. The gene bank of the Polytechnic University of Valencia in Spain, the Center for Genetic Resources in the Netherlands, and the ERP in Raczykov in Poland. The visit was developed with the different work sessions. In these work sessions, there was a detailed review of the gene bank manual, looking in detail every activity carried out in the gene bank. The reviewers also visited the facilities, cold chambers, plant growth chambers, greenhouses, laboratories, offices, everything. And there was interviews with all the staff of the gene bank. In the last sessions, the reviewers wrote a report about the review process, and in the last session, the report was commented, all aspects of the manual, and there were highlighted the pros and recommendations in case needed. Normally, it is, of course, necessary to do recommendations. So this was the first cycle of peer review visits, and this was made under the umbrella of the Generous Rights Project. There were then 3 reports of the peer review, 1 for each gene bank. These reports are available in the webpage of the ECPGR. And also, as this was the pilot experiment, there is an extra a document which is the observation and conclusions based on one cycle of 3 GenBank peer review. A part of this first pilot experiment, in the agent project, there was 4 cycles of peer reviews planned. And in 2022, there have been already 2 cycles of peer reviews. In the first one, the GenBanks involved were the Crop Research Institute of the Czech Republic, the ITK from Germany, the National Agricultural and Food Center in Slovakia. In the second peer review cycle, the GenBanks involved was the National Institute for Agriculture and Food Research and Technology in Spain, the Center for Genetic Resources in the Netherlands, and the Institute of Plant Genetic Resources in Sadovo. So all the reports for each of these visits, each one of these visits, are available again in the webpage of the exhibition. The AQUAS, AGIS, AQUAS, and peers. And also all the manuals for all the GenBanks are available in this. Also in the agent project, there will be 2 more cycles. One of the first one, I think, is already done. And the GenBanks involved were the Nordic GenBank, the Millennium Seed Bank, and the Center for Genetic Resources of the Netherlands. And there is one more that will be done, I think, in the near future. I'm not completely sure. So it seems that this is a good way to see the quality of management of the procedures in the GenBanks. In the report of the agent project, in the report of the 3rd annual meeting, it was stated some things about this peer review process. Reciprocal peer visits allow managers to see practices in other institutions, share expertise and knowledge, and identify strengths as well as weaknesses and areas for improvement. This was very important, at least in our case, from our GenBank, because we learned a lot about the CGN and the Radchikov GenBank in our case. Recommendations given in the review reports can be used to lobby for funding, to implement them. If you are lucky, it is not always possible. GenBank reviews provide external and expert perspectives that can highlight GenBank challenge and requirements to the policy makers responsible for allocating funds. And observing how different GenBanks address similar problems is an enriching experience for GenBank managers. To share and compare different types of management facilities and protocols is not only useful, but also highly encouraging and inspiring. I have to say that in the ECPGR, Plant Genetic Resources Strategy for Europe, the peer visits to GenBanks are mentioned as an integral part of quality improvement for the GenBank. So I want to stress here some aspects that can be discussed at the end of the session. Can peer reviews be developed in a sustainable system, and how? What role should peer reviews play in a GenBank certification system? Could peer reviews replace the independent audit? And could peer reviews also play a role in other components of the research infrastructure? We are clear these aspects for discussion at the end of the session.
Thank you very much. So we will have 2 more sessions, Maria Jose, and if you can stay for the discussion session, that would be great.
Right, thank you. So I hope to be even faster than Theo. The reason is that Joana and I have been swapping presentations and repeating, and unfortunately repeating certain elements. And I have a lot of repeats in the presentation I'm just about to give. So I'm going to cut out the repeats. I don't want to waste your time. And I'm just going to focus on the novel things that I want to say. So part of the novel things I want to say is that the actual methodology for sorting out where we need standards. And although part of the audience has seen this part of the presentation before, I'm going to go through it again for the ones who haven't. So basically, we have methodologies of how we're doing in situ conservation, whether it is genetic reserve-based conservation or on-farm conservation. We have like an ABC of how to do it, how to implement it. And we need to look at each one of those steps and see where it involves potential standardization. And so that's exactly what I did. So if you look at this table here, we have effectively 3 columns. So the one on the left-hand side is for plant protected area-based genetic reserve conservation, where you're conserving crop biorelatives within existing protected areas. The central one is where you're also, and I would still call these genetic reserves, so this is something we do need to discuss. We haven't actually agreed this yet. But where you're doing genetic reserve-based type conservation, but this time outside of existing protected areas. So we haven't got the formal protected area authority to back us up. And then the third column is for on-farm conservation. So this is where the conservation uniquely in terms of conservation is not done by a conservationist, but done by farmers. And they maintain the material for generation to generation. Then we have each one of these steps. And so I've identified the steps, for instance, for a protected area-based genetic reserve conservation. And we have active genetic reserve site selection, population selection, network selection, core descriptors, population management descriptors. So at the moment, often when we're talking about in situ descriptors that have been published, like the FAO set that were published recently, they were actually the descriptors that would be associated with putting material into RISCO and making the material available. They're not full descriptors for all the elements of in situ conservation. So we need to distinguish between those two. And then population management descriptors associated with those. So those would not normally be things that would be included in the RISCO descriptors, I think. And then population monitoring, policy support, user access 1 and user access 2. And I explain user access 1 as the stage where you actually take the material from the genetic reserve and move it to the genetic resources center for active backup. And then user access 2 is then getting the material, the former in situ material, which is now ex situ and is regarded as a normal ex situ accession and made available if that's your desire. And we'll come back to discussing that later. So all of the ones which aren't highlighted are areas where we have already existing standards. So actually, I think we've done quite well in developing standards for in situ in recent years. And then the ones in the sort of pucey yellow color are ones where we don't actually have existing descriptors, but I think we have other descriptors that can be used and adapted. And then we have some highlighted in green, which are impossible to read in what you're looking at. These need to be developed. So we have 3 that need to be developed associated with population monitoring. We haven't done the descriptors for those yet, but the others we're making progress with. So we have a process of moving forward with these quality management descriptors for in situ. We have this set here, and the first step is to send that set out and see if we've missed anything. Now, I'm absolutely certain we've missed some sets of descriptors, and so they need to be added in, but possibly even additional steps that need standardization. Because we do believe, I don't think there's any point in disputing it. We need standard descriptors to operate effectively. And so the first step is sending this table out, getting feedback on the missing data, and then adding it in. And then once we have a complete set, sending those lists out in draft form to various people and asking them to review them and check that they are the most appropriate possible. Okay, then we have a whole load of standard things, and this is what I'm going to pass over quickly, but I wanted to dwell just for a second on this one here. So this is the minimum quality standard for genetic reserve conservation for individual protected areas. So this is the things, if you're setting up a genetic reserve for in situ conservation of crop wild relatives, these are the standards have to be met by that population to be formally included in the network, yes? And so the first one, we have location of following identification of the site following rigorous scientific process, that's fine. Located in a protected area, this one may not be fine. So what I'm saying here is when we drew these up in 2012, we were saying the only real way to do in situ crop wild relative conservation was in a protected area. I think now we've gone beyond that because of OECMs. They're a new idea, and I think they're very effective for the kind of conservation we're doing. Often with crop wild relatives, predominantly they're not found in protected areas. They're found in disturbed agricultural habitats. So that's why OECMs are going to be so important for that. So that shows the need to actually review these. Right, now I'm going to dash ahead right to my very final slide, which is this one. So how am I doing? Must be not 12 minutes yet. No, okay, good. Okay. So here we have a rather complicated diagram which tries to show the different options for the relationship between gene banks, between in situ conservation, gene banks, ex situ, and users. Yes? Okay, so if you look at the left-hand side, the green side of this diagram, you've got the various processes involved in managing in situ populations of crop wild relatives. On the right-hand side, the blue area, that's the gene bank. And at the bottom, you have flowing out of the gene bank towards the users, the standard process for the gene bank supplying users. Okay? So what we're doing is we're taking, I'm arguing the case that we cannot rely on protected area managers or farmers to supply the user themselves. Because one, they don't have the time, it's not their job, they're not professional conservationists in that sense. They know nothing of, certainly protected area managers know nothing about plant genetic resources. And in my experience, I'm not being derogatory, but they're not so keen on learning. They already have a full-time job, they don't need some additional heavy burden. So for instance, if we're deciding priorities for future plant genetic resources conservation in situ, that decision is not going to be made by protected area managers because they don't have the background or the skill to do it. It has to be made by the gene bank staff, simply because the gene bank staff are the only ones that have ever been trained in making those kind of decisions, yes? So you're no longer just making decisions for the gene bank, you're making it for the whole of genetic resource conservation, yes? Okay. So then if we're basically what we're doing is we're sending backup samples as a necessary proviso for doing in situ conservation from the in situ site to the gene bank. And we have 4 different options, and it would be lovely if that was bigger, and even the one here is bigger, because with my poor eyesight, I can hardly read them myself. So we have 4 options, yes? So the first one, option 1, is long-term ex situ conservation. So in other words, that means every accession that goes into backup becomes a normal, straightforward ex situ collection, and every in situ accession that's backed up becomes a normal ex situ and is treated exactly the same as any ex situ. Yes, that's option 1. Option 2, God, I can't read this. There's no way I can make this bigger, is there? No, the man isn't here. Okay. Black box, I think, is the next one. Okay, so the next one is, no, that's, oh, well done, Joana. Oh, but now we can't see the whole thing. How do you get it to?
Just click there.
Oh, okay. Okay, sorry, leave it like that. Okay. So the next one is black box. Okay, so here, the material goes into the ex situ backup as a backup, and then goes into the gene bank, and they do basically nothing with it. It's catalogued as being available, being in the gene bank, but it's not available for utilization. And so it's treated like a black box. We all know about black box accessions. It's a standard black box accession. That's option 2. Now, that to me doesn't mean it's conserved at all, because if it's not available for use, then it's not the same as ex situ. If we're going to have parallel in situ and ex situ, both sets must be available, and you can't have something going into the gene bank as black box and saying, okay, that's I guess it is a kind of conservation, but it's not active conservation in the way you and I would want it to be. Then we have option 3, which is in situ supply. So say for instance, material that's available in situ sites, and anyone on the in Eurisco can see that the material is available in this site. The user would contact the gene bank. The gene bank would send someone out. They would collect the material that's requested by the breeder. They'd bring it back and then send it off to the breeder. So that's supply and demand, yes? That's option 3. The trouble with option 3, I agree, this may be easy if you actually read it, but anyway, let's try. So option 3, the trouble is that if you have a breeder or some other user asking for the material may not be available at that time of year. The seed may not be just available. You know, seed is only available for 2 or 3 weeks of the year. So you may have to wait a whole year till you have the option to actually access that material. And it may take 1.5 years for the material to get back to the breeder. So it's not a fast system. Then we have option 4. So this is the one that I'm calling demand and supply. So what I'm saying here for option 4, and that's the one on the left-hand side here, is the material comes in as an ex situ backup. It's registered and documented as normal. It's cleaned and dried. The next step would be germination testing, but I'm saying we don't, if we're going to have access to the in situ material, we don't need to actually do even germination testing, because we're regularly going to be resampling the material anyway. So that may be a decision, and maybe you disagree with that. You say we need everything to be tested for germination. So that's germination I put in a kind of highlighted color to show that it may or may not be required. And then it's packed and stored. But the difference from the standard ex situ is it's not regenerated. So the big detailed expense associated with ex situ would be regeneration. And here you don't do regeneration, you just do recollecting from the original site. So it's cheaper. Yes? So if I can remember those two, we're through them again. So the one last one, the first one is the normal ex situ. So who of those, can you remember all 4? Am I barking up a tree here? If you think that ex situ treating exactly the same as ex situ, put your hand up. This is the dynamic part of my presentation. Yes? Right, no one's putting their hand up. Thank God for that. Okay. The next one is black box. So black box, Theo's putting his hand up. You only have to choose one of these, Theo. Okay. Good, good. We're doing very well here. We're getting the answer I want. Okay, then the next one is supply and demand. Theo, you. This supply and demand here is in here because of a discussion that Theo and I had a couple of years ago. Anyway, okay. So then basically the rest of you, I hope, are saying number 4, which is the one where you don't have to do regeneration. It goes in and then it's available as a normal ex situ collection. Yes? Oh, yeah, sorry, you're not putting your hand. Oh, look, they're all flooding up. Look at them. Even Lorenzo's tempted to put his hand up. But look, the point I'm making is this way, and we do need to sort this out. And I think it would have to be sorted out ideally at a European level, but if not, we could do it nationally. So national governments would make the relationship between in situ sites and particular gene banks to put their backup samples into and then make them available to the user. And that's something we're actually actively doing in the UK at the moment, is sorting out that relationship. So the favoured one for me is the one that doesn't require the backup. And that, Joe. Oh yes, sorry. How are they going to vote though? Ah, yes. So if you online, and I'm sorry I forgot about you online, if you online would like to vote in this, I would genuinely like to hear the people who disagree with the fourth option I gave, which was the demand and supply, where the material is not regenerated and is actually made available. If you don't believe that's the best option, then get back to me, because I'd like to hear your reasoning of why it's not the best option, so that we can maybe think about this a bit further. And I should say the original idea for this is not just mine. The original idea is from Anna Palmer.
Okay, so now I'll go finally. Vojtech Holubec from Crop Research Institute in Prague. He will be talking about building capacity to assure quality in PGR management.
Okay. Building capacity to assure quality in PGR management. Yeah. So it is associated with the deliverable of the same name, and in fact, the speakers in this last section practically explained everything what should be included in this topic of capacity building. So this is the deliverable 2.4. Plans for capacity building programs supporting gene banks and in situ on-farm conservation networks, enriching minimum quality standards and allowing gene banks to become certified. These standards will be discussed and finalized at the second and so on. So I wanted to know what everything covers capacity building, because it is not only the training system, but according to this graph, which was taken from internet, means it starts with number one, assessment and gap analysis of the current system, then planning, training of workshops, which will be the main body of my presentation, and ends with networking and collaboration and monitoring if all things keep going in proper way as it was awaited. So I will mention these points. One, this assessment, training, and networking monitoring. Within will include the information about the legal things, global, international documents, European, ECP, especially ECPGR. Information, and basic part should be devoted to ex situ, gene banking, on-farm conservation, in situ conservation, and that's practically will be all. So to say a few words about introduction, importance of plant genetic resources conservation for future generation and for current use is important for three main use: for breeding, research, and education. And this science about plant genetic resources conservation is very complex, and it has been built for more than 50 years. Some gene banks are very old, some are recent, and it is necessary to educate and share experience among gene banks. That's great. We have in ECPGR, we have now Gene Bank Forum, which is practically coming in the right time for this project. and it is desirable to increase levels of less developed gene banks or different oriented gene banks by complex capacity building, and thus to promote creation of base infrastructure. Where we focus, this is my proposal, so it will be subject to discussion because I'm a gene bank person. Maybe I will get say some disagreements from other fora. So it should be a focus to national gene banks, and in some countries there are many gene banks or few gene banks. It is expected they should be somehow under leadership of national coordinator or national program or Ministry of Agriculture or other bodies, and should have some accepted methodology. So I think I would say it is not focused to all genetic resources keepers in the country. So and of course it is focused to other specialized collection of plant genetic resources, especially vegetatively propagated plants, which the methodology is a little bit different from regular seed propagated plants. I would say it is not focused to regular farmers unless they keep important on-farm plant genetic resources. On the other hand, this is European conditions. On the other hand, farmers in the third world, they keep principal amount of land races, and it is just the different level. And of course, I shouldn't omit NGOs, which are involved in keeping important land races. I would also avoid not focus to organization of private companies which sell plant genetic resources, because it's not always very precise in verification of these land races. So the first point is assess and gap analysis. It was largely discussed by preceders. It is necessary to specify initial stage, assess each participating gene banks to meet minimum quality standards. Peer review was mentioned here. I will not talk about widely, but quality standards must be discussed in details and agreed upon the minimum quality standards for gene banks, and what must be done. This was partly mentioned by Nigel. That is already done for in situ. I thought it was necessary to do, but it was already done. So it was necessary to discuss how to on wider forum what is acceptable in different conditions, national conditions, and so on. It is very necessary to respect national environment and historical starting points, because we have so diverse starting points. Just to mention the old Europe and the eastern part of Europe, which had definitely different conditions, where private sector was interrupted and continuity of land races was not kept. So this is if we want to participate in this system, everybody, all countries, it must be taken into consideration. And the gap analysis should be a basis to adjust proper capacity building. So I will mention the proposals of training, customized training programs and workshops to address specific needs identified during assessment, especially the gap analysis, including germplasm handling, regeneration, data management in situ on farm, etc. There is a lot of fields. I should also include. I wanted to also include information and training about global and European organization, especially FAO, Commission for Genetic Resources, views reporting on the state of plant genetic resources. The international treaty, it's necessary to mention that member countries are binded by these documents issued by international treaty. So and CBD Nagoya, which I don't want to talk because I don't like it, but it's my problem. And I think it is necessary to include such things, such information about this international global documents in the training system. Now I go into ECPGR. It is very important for Europe because it is pillar for PGR management in Europe, including all these Euroscore, AGES, Aquas, and so on. EVA, it was already published or mentioned here. So this is really basic. I remember ECPGR and in the beginning IPGRE was strategic, let's say, body making strategy for PGR conservation in Europe. So to be concrete, now we go to ex situ. So it is necessary to train about gene bank or gene bank processes, to describe all processes of seed handling, and in order to reach the highest longevity, because actual germination ability is not sufficient, because sometimes small let's say worse treatment of seeds is not it doesn't affect germination ability, but affects the longevity. Standard threshold values, number of seeds, humidity, germination, and so on. And another part of gene bank is a regeneration process. So regeneration, planning regeneration cycles to keep number of regeneration as not frequent as possible, in order any excessive regeneration can include some let's say mistakes and so on. It is necessary to ensure biologically safe regeneration and seed handling, including isolation, different for self-crossing, different for outcrossing, especially for auto-incompatible species. They are really important information that people may not know, and it is necessary to train. Wind pollination, insect pollination, and of course another story is vegetatively propagated group of plants which needs well, separate block of training. Information system, it was also mentioned several times during this meeting. I mentioned that it is necessary to keep. It is good to put in the documentation system all kinds of conservation, including cryopreservation, in vitro in vitro documentation, and I also agree. I also propose in situ and on farm. On farm conservation to describe basic principle, and it was already mentioned here. If it is on farm primary or secondary as a backup, it is and it is very important. At least I feel it that it is under auspices of national coordinators or national gene bank or whatever plant genetic resources center. And in situ conservation, just to mention that collaboration with environmental sector is required, and there are different conditions, different conditions, and some countries can have it under Ministry of Environment, but agriculture is interested in crop alternatives. Therefore, I think it must be in hands of agriculture or gene bank national systems. And networking and collaboration, encouraging collaboration and information to exchange information about gene banks, and monitoring, as I mentioned in the beginning. It is necessary to keep attention if all things which were taught keep in proper direction, and because conditions may change due to terminated funding or people exchange, and so it is necessary to continue. I think this is my presentation.
Okay, since we have now 20 minutes for discussion, yes, more or less.
These are the points that we think can be discussed, of some perhaps the people in the audience give their opinions. For example, can peer reviews be developed in a sustainable system, or is a system that can be included in the research infrastructure we are trying to create? Because the quality of the gene bank is a thing to be considered in the research infrastructure. So one of the systems to see the quality of the gene banks is this, that is already done in some cases. And it seems that is a good thing, because the reports, I have seen some of the reports that have been made by the reviewers, and they make sense. They are able to see the weaknesses of each gene bank, and of course the possibility of improve these weaknesses depends of in gene bank or on each country also. But I would like to know the opinion of implement this system in the research infrastructure.
Yes, we have someone. Lisa.
Yeah, it's Lisa Lucas Stevenson from Nordgen. I've had the pleasure of taking part of a peer review and of CGN and Q, Millennium Seed Bank, and I've done lots of reviews before, and I think it has a lot of potential. And I think it's a good way to go forward. But I would like to roll back a little on what is it, on which terms are we making this peer review, because it's very dependent on those who are doing the peer review and their knowledge as well. So to have maybe more a clear there is a checklist, but it's, I mean, there's some of the things, it's not checking the actual system. What system do you have? It's more checking on some issues and it's very up to the individuals to judge whether it's good or not. And we do not have the standards. Coming back to what standards are we up and doing this peer review against? There is a huge potential learning from each other, and such a report should be seen in a very friendly way. So I think it needs, before we can say and have success with peer reviews more than we have today, I think we need to have better standards of what is it that we are actually checking out, and also checking the actual system. Do we have a description of what kind of procedures and instructions and checklists and flowcharts do we have? What are we covering? What are we checking? When are we doing it? And when is something good enough? So I think it's very productive, very good that we get such a discussion here, but it's ongoing in many different fora. And the Gene Bank Manager Network is now, very soon, we're going to start it up, saying me, I'm the chair. And this is one of the places where this also could be discussed. So it sort of needs a home, and we need to find that home for this, but also to discuss and hear everyone what they feel about it, and maybe draw more on the positive side than saying things are not working well. So maybe saying, okay, but we could actually learn from each other and be better at some things. Thank you. That was a very long comment. Sorry.
No, I agree with you. The system, it seems, is good, but it can be improved. One of the things that have to be taken into account is the choice of the 3 gene banks participating. In my case, it was one big gene bank in Poland, in Bratsko, medium size gene bank, the CGN, in the Netherlands, and a small gene bank in the Polytechnic University of Valencia. I learned a lot from each other. The 3 gene banks were conserving seeds, and in other cases, I don't know exactly the facilities or the other groups of 3 gene banks that have been already do the peer review process, but of course there are some things that have to be taken into account. The type of material conserved in the gene bank, and perhaps I think that one of the things that we do is to review in detail the manual, the gene bank manual. In the gene manual, there is a lot of information. I have not commented all the information included, but it's a very large document. And but it can be added more documents or other aspects to be reviewed in the visits. So the system can be improved, of course.
Just a short note to distinguish certification and peer review of gene bank. Certification by ISO is to make order. Everything, all processes must be precisely written. Yeah, we have manuals, gene bank manuals, but sometimes some parts are omitted. But these in certification agency finds what is missing and to make help to make the order. On the other hand, peer review is great. How to learn what can be done better by neighbor gene banks, or and it is completely different because it is very practical what we need. Yeah, this is very necessary.
Perhaps the peer review is a first step before getting the certificate. I don't know really the difference between the quality certificate and peer review process, because okay, the IPK have the certificate, and Nordic Gene Bank also, the CGN also. Perhaps they can answer the question or provide some suggestions.
So from what I understood, each gene bank has its own manual. There's no consensus manual for the ideal gene bank. So,
Pardon. No.
yes, Maria Jose.
No, excuse me. I didn't know if it was a question or you are explaining more.
No, it's a question. Is there an ideal manual that is shared among gene banks, or is each gene bank has its own?
The gene bank it has been developed by I don't know, is it the PGR or IPRI? And the gene bank contains all things that have to be answered and reviewed, and you have to put the information of your gene bank in this manual. It has some parts dedicated to gene banks that conserve seeds, other parts that you have to fill in if you conserve vegetative material or in vitro collection of cryopreservation or something like that. But the template is the same for each gene bank, and you have to fill in all the information. Yeah. I think not all gene banks have the gene bank manual filled in. In our case, we didn't have it, and we did it when previously to have the peer review. So at least it's a good thing, because you have to think really in what you do things to fill in all the manual.
So to go back to my question, there is a blueprint for a manual, and then each gene bank translates it in its own manual, in its own practices. So I guess the most efficient method, again, here the infrastructure might be of help, would be to come to a consensus one, and then have that one ISO assessed. That would really save a lot of effort, instead of going to each gene bank and make the ISO assessment of each gene bank. And then once you have the manual ISO assessed, then you could apply the peer review method.
A few comments. Thank you, Maria Jose, for the excellent presentation, by the way. Okay, the GenBank manual was created in Aegis. That's, I mean, all those abbreviations, but the quality AQUAS, the quality management system for Aegis. If you are a GenBank and want to participate in Aegis, you're supposed to create transparency about how you do things, and you're asked to submit a GenBank manual. Some GenBanks did it, not that many. When I was reviewing for the CGIAR, GenBanks in the CGIAR, I visited a GenBank in Colombia, CIAT, and there was a curator, a well-respected bean researcher, Daniel de Boek, and he said, I've been reviewed all my life, and those reviewers come in and they look around and go away and they say something, and this is the first time in my life, he said, that I truly could benefit from the review, and that was because experts like him, GenBank people, looked around thoroughly and gave feedback. They asked questions like, is it wise to put your phytosanitary activities in between the storage, and yeah, that type of thing. Why do you use 5 tubes and not 10? Okay, on that level. So then the idea arose that we could use each other's experience of GenBanking by simply visiting each other. Plus, we need transparency. We have to be open about the things we do in the GenBank to be able to start improving. We can't keep up smoke screens. And my experience is that very few GenBanks want smoke screens. Most of them want to improve, right? Plus, it was a nice opportunity to create those GenBank manuals and get those more complete and learn from each other. So it's a capacity building issue. So the sword cut it from many sides. We say that in English, but you get the point. It worked on many ways. problem is, or questions are, how many genebanks do you do? Do you send one expert to another? Or so we came up with that unit of 3 different sizes, and so far experiences have been very positive. Questions that were raised by Maria Jose are very relevant. I mean, if we use it, I think it is a capacity building. We learn from each other. We should not do the audit. The audit says you don't stick to what you're supposed to do. Okay, and that brings me back to your question that the GMANC manual should describe the way things are done in the GMANC, right? By the way, in 1992, my GMANC published a description of GMANC protocols, and it was the most requested document that we had ever published. Everybody wanted to know how we did things, right? Later, when we had to transfer to ISO, I found out that everything that was written there were dreams. Regenerate with 60 plants, but if there are only 40 plants germinating, well, then we take 40 plants, right? So the bottlenecks were not recorded. What do you do if you go below? And of course, the GMANC manuals tend to also be recorded dreams, right? I'm perhaps a bit too critical. The auditing system is making sure, one, that the manuals, and they have to be more detailed to become part of a quality management system. Then we have to go to SOPs, right? Standard operating procedures, and they have to contain more detail than the GMANC manual. But they have to comply to the standards that we agree on, and we have to have a mechanism to make sure that the GMANC actually applies those protocols, and that is auditing, right? So those are the elements. But in getting to that level, in learning from each other, also in getting inspired. I mean, I had the pleasure to visit Nordgen, and that was really a very nice experience. That's a very good GMANC. And I learned a lot and got ideas that I can apply in my GMANC, right? And so the learning experience is also very valuable. So I'm convinced that we should somehow use that mechanism of peer review in whatever system we're going to create. How? I think in that first stages of creating capacity, of creating transparency, not beyond. Auditing should be independent, because there should be somebody there who says, you're not doing what you're supposed to do. And I don't want to take that role, if you see what I mean. That was a very long answer, I'm sorry.
Sorry to interrupt. I will give you the microphone. I just wanted to know whether the other speakers would like to discuss any points before Vojtech. Nigel, do you know? It's okay. Lisa.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we have one of the most comprehensive quality management systems of all the gene banks in Europe at Nordgen. And we took liberally the decision we will not go for an ISO standard because it don't fit to the gene bank. It can describe the whole system. It can, how do we want the quality management system with internal audits, external audits, and so on. And we did not go any other standards. And the gene bank manual we think is too simple. We looked at the ISTA system for the seed lab, and many of the procedures we have in the seed lab is on ISTA. And we picked up a little bit of here and there to make it fit. And our quality management system is embedded in every single of the staff members. They write their own SOPs, and has a system to have it qualified by peers and to have it approved on somebody at another level. So we use the mechanisms from such a system, from an ISO system or other system, and it's a true help. Also, if you have changing staff and so on. So I agree with Theo. It really have to carefully think about what kind of system is it, and there is a difference between an audit and a peer review, and I think it somehow has to get closer to an audit, but it's very difficult as a colleague to do an audit. So it has to find some sort of balance, meaning going back again to finding, okay, what are the standards and how could such a system be built up? And I actually think there's a lot of potential for progress over grace in going into the quality management. If that somehow could be of insurance of how to do things, but it has to be in a way that some are not, that they're feeling this is too burdenful, because it's a huge job to create such a system. But if over time find something that everybody say, okay, at least some of this I take and I can use it, because there are gene banks here that have already, been going the first way, have a model. Most of our SOPs are written and procedures are written in English, for instance. So also some in Swedish. That might be a bit difficult. But so to find a system, I think it could find maybe a home here, but I think it needs to be discussed among gene bank managers also. And what does that imply for the gene banks, and what kind of system, and what is actually an help, because what works for Theo would never work for us, for instance, and we will maybe never work our system for the CGN. So there are many systems. So yeah.
So listening to you, this seems also a capacity building element, isn't it? It's not pointing the finger, and it's being constructive and friendly. Yeah, so something to consider as well. Okay, anyone else would like to ask questions, raise any issues online or here? Okay, so if not, you can close this session for today.